Well, in the interest of time, I'm not going to introduce these people who've already been speaking to you. So the way we'll work this is each of you gets a couple of minutes to articulate what you think the field would look like in 10 years. I mean, we all have a shared vision that focused ultrasound will improve the lives of millions of people around the world with serious medical disorders. Now, what does that really mean? It's specifics. Wadi.
Okay, well, I have a very conservative view of this in that really what I'd like to see in 10 years' time is about 5 or 6 very successful applications which are funded and are utilized throughout the world for the benefit of our patients. As simple as that. Having been in the field for a long time, the progressive frustration that I have felt with these new procedures we've developed, which are clearly effective and clearly beneficial to our patient in so many ways, and yet they remain on the fringes of our medical practice in so many ways for so many different reasons, that if we could see 5 or 6 main applications utilized on a day-to-day basis in multiple centers, I would feel fulfilled.
Thank you. Paige.
So here's the optimist perspective, somewhat realistic, somewhat optimistic. I think building off of the success with essential tremor, my hope is that that same model will lead to the application for prostate to be not only approved, but to be reimbursed by that point, such that we're seeing a large volume of patients being treated for tremor and for prostate cancer, for intermediate risk prostate cancer, with MR-guided focused ultrasound. That's one. I think on a very practical level, I think both of those are achievable within that time frame. I think from a preclinical to clinical transition, I'm optimistic that the question of can focused ultrasound be utilized for immunomodulation. I'm hoping that some of the work that we see that's being done in, for example, UVA on breast will transition to other cancers, pancreatic, et cetera, and that we see some of these preclinical models finally transitioning into the clinic to test and to validate whether this approach will work. And then I think on the device side, I think we're going to see a change in the device so that it's, the footprints are different, maybe more tailored to certain applications, and maybe migrating away from some of the MR-based applications. Maybe that's utilized more in prostate, for example, where it really makes a lot of sense, or in brain, although that's maybe even arguable in brain. And other applications maybe more fluoro-guided or ultrasound-guided as needed. And then I think one other device component, I think that the application of artificial intelligence, as we were talking about earlier today, will make treatment planning a much, much smarter process than it is right now, and thereby make the procedures much faster and more efficient.
Graham.
All right, so my perspective comes from that as a neurosurgeon, and also taking a step back related to some of what Neil talks about commonly, which is the myriad of different mechanisms that ultrasound can play in body tissues, especially in the brain. And so from my perspective, what's enabled where we are today in the brain related to essential tremor is the ability to measure with a non-invasive tool like thermometry the dose of the effect under that mode of ultrasound. If there are really 18 different mechanisms, biological mechanisms of this potentially disruptive technology, we may need 18 different ways to measure those different modes of ultrasound in the body, specifically the brain, where we can't see a lot of what's going on. And in addition, with that, we need to understand the biology of those different modes of ultrasound in a much more succinct, precise way. So to me, the next 10 years is going to be not necessarily about device development specifically, but about how we can measure the effects and how we can biologically understand those effects so that we can really leverage technology from a mechanism-informed perspective. What I see is we need to come together with the groups out there who are modeling diseases at a very, very high level. We're a lot of engineers and scientists here that have expertise in devices, but there's a whole world out there on modeling diseases. We need to partner with the best people in our diseases to really get to a clinical translational platform and then apply in clinical trials those findings.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're in.
Well, I've seen many things now, I guess. When I came to this country and met with Price, those days where as soon as somebody hears about breast cancer, it was very frightening. Then we worked towards the developing few things, and when I saw the mitral valve moving in our small scanner, which had only 30 degrees, and as you can see, echocardiography is worldwide used now. Even small villages in Bangladesh, everywhere. And with the iPhone, we can transmit this information. I see the very similar thing for focused ultrasound in few years. As what you just said, it's now in the hands of the clinics. As we prove it's how it can be used more, its ability. And of course, the pie in the sky is still immunotherapy, recreating the vessels, regenerating the vessels with stem cells, pulse focus ultrasound. So it's limitless. And I think we are just scratching the surface. And we will be seeing many good things coming out with lots of intelligent built-in instrumentations. That's how I see it.
Okay?
So I come at this from that technology perspective. Can you hear me? Yeah, I come at this from the technology perspective, and I guess the way I look at focused ultrasound, one of the strengths of the technology is its flexibility. I think we could see that from this week. You can pretty much design devices in any configuration, and that's a real strength. And so I would like to see in 10 years, I hope I see in 10 years, a real customization of devices for very specific applications, so they're optimal. I think what I see today is we have a lot of first-generation systems that have shown proof of concept, very powerful proof of concept, and the things we need to improve, speed, efficiency, will happen when you really customize for specific applications. I want to see all the technology be vendor agnostic, image guidance agnostic, so we can really move devices from point of care to the operating room to the radiology suite. It doesn't have to be in a single place. And I think if we can overcome and achieve those things, the technology will have a real permanent place in medicine.
Okay, now I'm going to ask some questions, and I want to go down the line and have you answer them rapid fire, okay? We're going to deal with facts, not editorials, okay? So today, there are about 550 commercial treatment sites around the world. To put it in perspective, there are about 10,000 radiotherapy or stereotactic radiosurgery sites around the world. 550 today. How many do you think there will be in 10 years? Wadi?
10 times that.
5,500.
Yeah, approaching whatever it is, the radiotherapy one.
10,000.
10,000.
Okay.
I'll play Price is Right. Let's go 2,500.
2,500.
I would say about the same number as radiation therapy.
10,000.
I think it's going to be more than 10,000.
Okay.
I go higher too.
Right. And I think that 10,000 might be low because, as Mary Lou Jepson said, 2/3 of the world doesn't have access to this type of technology, to radiotherapy, and the population is growing. Okay. Our best estimate is that last year, 100,000 patients were treated around the world with focused ultrasound. 10 years from now, how many patients? Let's start at the other end. 10 years from now, how many patients will be treated around the world in what you guys say is 10,000 treatment sites?
I don't see why you couldn't have 1,000 treatments per site per year.
So how many is that? You're an engineer, I can't do the arithmetic.
What is it, 10,000, 100, million?
A million?
Oh, a million, sure.
A million.
How many sites do the echocardiography? How many babies are born with ultrasound? So similarly, I think, we have a huge promise here because we have non-invasive.
Hey, the fact, not the edit. We want a number.
Okay.
Okay, we can get the editorial later.
I think it's going to be much more than 10 times what we are doing.
Okay, more than 1 million. Graham?
Yeah, I agree, more than 1 million, closer to what we treat with radiation therapy
Okay.
today. Yeah.
Paigey?
A million's a reasonable number. Just a guess.
I'll go with the million flow.
Okay, so we all, this looks like it's going to be a big deal, right? We all believed that at the beginning, and we now have some validation. Okay, what do you think are the top 3 indications that will be treated? Brain, cancer, pain, musculoskeletal. Wadi?
I'd go for brain as the sort of the pin-up poster for focused ultrasound at the moment, followed by the liver,
Okay,
and as many cancer applications as you can get at.
okay. Brain and oncology. Paigey?
Movement disorders will still be a large number. I think prostate will continue to be a large number, combining ultrasound and MR guidance by that point. And even though the number of patients is relatively small with pancreatic cancer, the number that are eligible for some treatment other than what's currently available will be relatively large. So I'm hoping that that's a significant number of the fraction.
I would say prostatic hypertrophy, and then cancers broadly, and then brain broadly. The 3.
Okay.
I'm very much similarly. I think the prostate has tremendous, future. But I also think there is a space for cardiovascular and regenerative disease, regeneration of the blood vessel, etc. So there is a good possibility with the combination to do some beneficial thing for the people who are having, for example, peripheral artery disease.
Okay.
I would just, same things I would just add if we talk about global access. I say we should consider, and it could be a huge growth area in the area of infectious disease.
Yeah. Okay.
One last plug for bone. If the results from the studies coming out of Europe, and if that transitions to the United States, obviously the volume of patients is quite high there. So with that data, it might drive utilization finally.
Okay, great. Let's talk about mechanisms. What are the top 3 or 4 mechanisms? A blood-brain barrier opening, immunomodulation, neuromodulation, ablation, drug delivery. Wadi?
Well, drug delivery, I think, is going to be a huge powerhouse in this area, and that kind of moves along with immunotherapy. They to me, are linked to 2 sides of the similar coin. And I think ablation, straightforward ablation, will stay with us for many years, but also driving the immune aspects.
I think of a necessity, ablation will still be the primary modality, but hopefully by then we'll have figured out some of the mechanisms whereby we can drive immunomodulation.
Yeah, I think just because we understand more about them now, thermal ablation would be one primary mechanism, a histotripsy type mechanism, and then neuromodulation.
I think the ablation will remain for a long, long time with us. Hopefully, we'll figure it out how to deliver the targeted delivery and use also with stem cells.
I would say from a technology, again, perspective, I think the mechanisms of actions that will be used are the ones where we have good feedback and control mechanisms, because if we don't have that, I don't think we can really viably use those. So thermal techniques work very well, and we know why, because we can see what we're doing. But the same goes for the other. I think that's key for us to do, demonstrate there's good feedback.
Okay. Terrific. Now, 10 years ago, there were 5 manufacturers of focused ultrasound devices. Today, there are 46. Using MR as a model, 35 years ago, there were several dozen small MR companies, and then there was a consolidation and a roll-up into the big 3, GE, Philips, and Siemens, and 3 smaller ones. how many manufacturers do you think, major manufacturers, will there be 10 years from now?
Almost impossible to answer that one. I'm not sure we will have that same consolidation into a big three like we have now with MRI. But one of the things I would say is that we will see a plethora of different approaches to delivering focused ultrasound. So it won't just be MR, it won't just necessarily be only ultrasound either. You don't just have those two. There will be a variety of ways and a variety of horses for a variety of different courses.
Okay. And what, give me a number. How many manufacturers? Okay.
Well, if you've got 46 now, I can envisage 50, because there will be some consolidation and there will be new people coming along and lots disappearing. So I would say something like that.
Okay.
I think that the obstacles that we've heard about today in terms of regulatory and reimbursement are an impediment to small companies making it from beginning to end. Yeah. And it takes the skill sets and experience of larger companies. And what I envision, though, is that what you'll have are smaller companies developing to a certain point and then being bought out by larger companies and being a component of what they offer as part of their armamentarium.
Did you give me a number?
What's the number now, 40-something?
50.
There's 46.
46.
And 10 years ago, there were 5.
Sure, let's go with 100.
Okay. Doesn't sound like much of a consolidation to me, but...
I think the opposite's going to happen. I think that given that we have so many different mechanisms of action, if we're indeed able to identify ways to create these closed feedback loops and monitor each of those mechanisms of action, you'll have an explosion of different technologies and companies that would not necessarily be consolidatable. And so I would say there'll be 400, 10x what we have now.
I go with that number also, but let me add one thing. My experience says that as the money starts flowing, the big companies will swallow the small ones. Yeah. It's a natural law.
Yeah.
So you may not see that many companies, but you may see lots of products.
I think that's right.
Okay, let me play the other side of it. I'd say lower, and I think because, especially if we can decouple these devices from the imaging companies or the imaging devices, then I would say I would expect the large medical device manufacturers in this global arena, the Medtronics, the Strykers, the others, to basically acquire this technology. So it may be fewer. It may just be in the hands of the people who distribute globally.
Mm-hmm. And just again, for perspective, the whole immunotherapy story, the trouble with the immuno-oncology drugs is they're working on tumors that are very heterogeneous in terms of their mutations. Focused ultrasound doesn't require that, so immunotherapy may be a big one. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's a sea change in the big pharma industry, a shift away from drug discovery to drug delivery. And it may be that focused ultrasound could be in large part viewed as a drug delivery vehicle. So do any of you have any additional comments about what the crystal ball looks like 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to say that whatever wise words we come up with, 10 years in time, it will be completely different. If we just think back about the brain application, which is currently the current star of our armamentarium, when I first went into focused ultrasound, the idea of doing the brain was just patently ridiculous. Who was going to get through the skull? It's just stupid. And I think we could well see a further similar development. So anything we say here is hypothesis.
Yeah. Any other comments?
I think where things are moving, and we keep hearing about cost, focused ultrasound will play a role in reduction of the cost, considerable amount. And there will be a reconciliation in terms of who does what.
Right. Well, 12 years ago when we started the foundation, there were 3 clinical indications in various stages of research and development. Today, there are more than 100. 10 years ago, we forecast that there would be maybe 10. So our ability to predict is not terrific. We will take your comments, the facts, and create a table. It'll be on the website, and we'll distribute it to everyone. with your names and pictures, okay? And 10 years from now, we'll bring you back. Maybe in a wheelchair, but we'll bring you back.
That's a good reward.
All right. Okay, we're a little behind schedule, so if there are no more comments, what's next?